During World War II, some of the American and British statesmen and other Allied forces leaders were among the most remarkable statesmen really in the history of the Western world. And they stood down the Nazi terror. Then it went right into the Cold War, where you had the Soviet behemoth on one side and all of their allied nations, and you had the West on the other side there. And you're talking people like Churchill, Eisenhower, several others, even some of the French leaders, men who were giants in their field and kept the world safe. Really, you had JFK during the Cold War, during the Cuban Missile Crisis. It stood nose to nose with Khrushchev and barely avoided a nuclear catastrophe because of statesmanship and the ability to make decisions under fire that kept people safe, that were wise courses of action, and it really permeated throughout the entire Cold War. Once the Cold War ended, however, things began to change a little bit because we got into too much hubris and arrogance because the Soviet behemoth was no more. So there was really no more counterweight that required you to be wise and sane and make trade-offs and do things that made sense and kind of give and take here and there, because there was another power over there that required that. But we did. But absent that other counterweight, now then Western leaders began to be able to freelance and to become more spin meisters more than actual foreign policy experts and statesmen. And now it's almost gotten to the point to where in some regards, they're more stage actors than they are statesmen. And now then there are some counterweights up there with China and Russia on either side of that. And the stakes are now increasing a great deal because we have not caught back up with that. Now, we're going to look at some of the current people who are leading the various Western countries today. We're going to see that, just how much of a problem we kind of have. And we have nobody better to do that with than Ian Puddick, coming to us live from London. You've seen Ian on here before. He's one of our favorites after having only been on a few times here. He's a businessman in London, but I consider Ian like the smartest man in London. That's kind of my tag for you.
That's not true. It's not true.
It is, because this guy's from Oxford, from Cambridge, and all these other places, but oftentimes they lack the real man on the street common sense that a lot of our viewers have, and which is why I think everybody values you so much. Because
it's a massive compliment, so thank you so much.
Well, it's true. That's why we're eager to have you on today, because you can cut through some of the BS here and look at it the way most regular people do, and we're going to get plenty of opportunity to do that. And let's just jump right into it. So let's first of all here, because it's been kind of making a lot of news here lately. Emmanuel Macron from France was talking a lot of smack recently, especially before all this stuff happened in Russia. We'll get to that later, about possibly putting French troops into Ukraine to fight maybe against Russia and maybe even NATO troops. Here's what he said when he was asked about that very recently.
Qu'est-ce qui se joue en Ukraine? Une guerre qui est existentielle pour notre Europe et pour la France. J'espère qu'on y reviendra parce que c'est un sujet clé. Et donc, je décide, parce qu'après 2 ans de guerre, après d'ailleurs, je veux ici le rappeler, que nous ayons systématiquement fait ce que nous disions que nous n'allions pas faire. Ce qui relativise aussi les propos très définitifs tenus parfois par certains à travers l'Europe. Il y a 2 ans, nous disions jamais on n'enverra de chars. On l'a fait. Il y a 2 ans, on disait jamais nous n'enverrons de missiles de moyenne portée. On l'a fait. Mais on disait jamais on enverra d'avions. Certains sont en train de le faire. Donc, nous avons mis trop de limites, si je puis dire, dans notre vocabulaire. Nous ne sommes pas dans l'escalade. Nous ne sommes pas en guerre contre la Russie. Simplement, il faut être clair, nous ne devons pas laisser la Russie gagner.
And I think we have to be honest and say that even if you're saying a bunch of nonsense, if you say it in French, it sounds really cool.
Sounds really cool. It's really, really articulate, really thoughtful, considered.
Very much.
Absolutely.
But let's look at some of the things he said there. First of all, he's trying to tell everybody with a straight face that this is after 2 years of war, where Russia has taken about 17% of Ukraine. and is struggling to get more, though they are finally starting to inch back forward. He's saying that if Russia is not defeated, it's an existential issue for France and for Europe. Now, somebody who lives in Europe, what say you to that?
Yeah, it's just nonsense. It's just utter nonsense. I mean, he's espousing the party line, really, but the party line isn't the line that's in the public interest. So, for example, you'll see that with all of them. I think I said last time when I was on your show when we were speaking, it's very easy to make a promise you don't have to keep. You can make those promises all day long if you're not going to have to keep them. So he can stand and talk really robust language about, I'm standing up for the honor, the integrity of my nation, France. We'll defend it to the hilt because it's an existential threat. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. But he doesn't have to do any of that stuff. And he knows he's not going to have to do any of that stuff. So when this is all over, he will be the man to say, well, I was the man that had the courage, the conviction, unlike anybody else, to stand up and take on Putin. I was unafraid. And it's great. It's a win-win for him. He didn't have to commit troops. He didn't. It's just nonsense. It's just nonsense.
But is it going to be a win for him? Because later on in that same interview, you had the interviewer say, yeah, but you know what? We're only making about 100 shells per day. And while Russia is making 250,000 per month on their own domestic case, plus whatever they're getting from North Korea, et cetera. So even they're saying to that audience he's trying to give that message to, that we don't even have the capacity to wage war against Russia at all, much less to help another country go in and do it themselves. So, I mean, at some point that has to get through to people, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the next French election, he'll be toast, which is why another reason why he's talking really robustly about why he has to stand up and fight. I mean, there are French troops there are already French special forces in Ukraine. So when they talk about, sending troops, well, there's French forces there. They shouldn't be there. Same with Britain. Britain's got special forces there. America's got special forces there. But yeah, they're just, making cups of tea and, all that, they're not fighting. Well, they are fighting because they're aiming weapon systems. They're giving intelligence. They're providing logistical support. But they are also targeted. They're also providing targeting. So, it's very, if I held your gun and pointed it and did everything for you, and I said, Colonel, can you just pull the trigger? I'm party to the crime. There's two of us. So we do that, and we play the white man where we're whiter than white, and we wouldn't behave so badly, but we do, and people see it through. People do see through it. I think there'll be a rise of nationalism. Because people don't want to be told by America and other nations what they should do, what's in their interest. And at the moment, the leaders that we've all got, and we've certainly had this conversation before, where Colonel McGregor said that basically we're all US, we're just vassals for the US. The US rings the bell, and we all jump up and say, what would you need us to do? And we're united in that, to be frank, as well. We're really, really good at doing that. And we have a very
on that very point, I think you and I have also spoken before about the oddity of Germany, especially after the Nord Stream 2 pipeline was mysteriously destroyed by who knows who, even though we had said that it would never survive contact if Russia went to war. So that was kind of odd because that hurt Germans. But speaking of Germany, even though Macron was talking all this kind of stuff, Schultz actually stood up a little bit after that when he added this.
Wir wollen nicht, dass der Krieg Russlands gegen die Ukraine zu einem Krieg zwischen Russland und der NATO wird. Darüber sind wir uns mit allen unseren Verbündeten einig. Das bedeutet auch keine deutsche Kriegsbeteiligung. Um es klipp und klar zu sagen, als deutscher Bundeskanzler werde ich keine Soldaten unserer Bundeswehr in die Ukraine entsenden. Das gilt.
So Macron was saying we're all united. We agree with this, that we're not taking troops off the table. We're not saying we're going to send them, but we're not taking that option off the table, except for his neighbor, his direct neighbor, says, yeah, we are. We're taking it off the table. It's not even on the table. So what do you make of Schultz's comments there?
Well, we had the leaked audio, didn't we, of the German generals talking about the Taurus cruise missiles. I happen to know that there are at least 20 Taurus missiles in Ukraine that were taken in there in 2022. They are configured for low range because I think they have a really long range for up to 500 kilometers or 300 to 500 kilometers. So they are configured for short range. And obviously you need Germans to fire them. Have they fired them? I have no idea whatsoever, so I'm not going to speculate. So they may have fired them in 2022 and not declared that. And obviously us Brits would have said, no, it was a storm shadow. It was a storm shadow. Well, who knows? Who knows? You can't believe them. You can't believe them. You can't believe a word they say because they have soldiers already on the ground. Okay, very small numbers, limited to special forces, but they have no integrity.
That's that's part of the problem is that we keep saying so many things that later turn out to be true, and then people just kind of roll their eyes and say, well, yeah, I mean, except for those, I mean, they're just not that many. Well, you said that there wasn't any in there at all, that they had been removed, and yet they are there, and whether they fired or not, who knows? But then there's also the issue behind, I think, Scholz's comments there, when at least somewhat separates him from Macron, is that the German army itself is in just woeful, pitiful shape. I mean, they have given so much of their stuff to the Ukraine side, especially in ammunition, that they themselves don't have that much. So as much as France is hurting in their own arms industry, so too is Germany. So you have the two stalwarts there, France and Germany, not doing very well for their own military should they have to go to war. So it seems kind of foolish to be talking about the possibility of going to war with Russia.
Absolutely. I mean, the word on the street was last week that the special forces, German special forces that were in Ukraine, were meant to have been removed and left Ukraine last week. Has that happened? I have no idea. But that was officially they were meant to, whoever they were meant to leave last week. I don't know. But, you know, you talk about depleted military and munitions. Britain's two biggest Ministry of Defence warehouses, one is in Oxford and one is up just north of Birmingham, Telford. They're depleted. They are depleted. It's insane. And we're talking about war. I mean, I'm not a military person at all, but common sense says, I mean, if you put your business hat on, what's the first rule of business? It's to negotiate yourself into a strong position or into a better position. How can you fight when you're in a really weak position? So you try and place yourself or position yourself in a strong position. Just common sense says that. And we're like was it Scooby-Doo? And he had a little dog called Scrappy-Doo. Well, we're like Scrappy-Doo that would put him up. We're happy to fight anyone. He's a giant monster and it's like ready to fight him. We're like that, and it's just meaningless. I mean, it's funny.
Yeah.
And
it's funny as long as we don't ever have to be called to do it, then it gets ugly. But
yeah, of course.
So far it has been. Okay, so the first two, Macron and Scholz, statesmen or actors?
Actors.
All right. So we're 0 for 2 on that so far. Let's move on to the next one. Now we have to move on to this side of the pond, and we have the next entrance on there is actually going to do something a lot more sophisticated with the ability to make videos, and this is a lot slicker production here, but watch this one.
We have to stand up to Putin and pass the national bipartisan bill, the National Security Bill, supporting Ukraine as they defend themselves against Putin's vicious onslaught, and prove to the world once more America can be relied on. We stand strong with our allies. We have to remember who we are. We're the United States of America. We keep our commitments. We never walk away from our friends. And we sure as hell don't bow down to Vladimir Putin.
So that's a very slick production. It's got great lighting. It's got dramatic angles. The camera shifts over here, back over here. And, we don't bow down to Putin. I mean, very rhetorical flourish there at the end. Very strong. But I'm not sure that the facts line up with that.
No, I mean, he's been doing it firstly for a very long time. I know he's not well, but he's doing it for a very long time. But his tonality and his conviction was very, very good, very reassuring, which is what you expect from your commander in chief. But it's nonsense. I mean, we won't. Obviously, it's a topic for another time. With Hunter Biden and all that stuff. He knows the history of Ukraine. He knows. Victoria Nuland, all of these people. He knows. But his narrative is very, very on ball. You know, Putin's a bad guy. He woke up one morning and invaded his neighbor, and if we don't stop him, he's going to keep going. It's a very simple narrative. It's a very powerful narrative, and the majority of people clearly buy it because of all the mainstream media. They don't know the history, but it's unraveling. It is unraveling. It can't go on.
And of course, as I will argue and have multiple times, I think also the last time you and I were on together, is that we don't have the capacity. We don't have the capacity with all the stuff that we're doing. We'll still barely at the end of this year come up to about a fifth of what Russia is domestically producing. And then it even gets worse when you add in what they could get from North Korea, just in artillery shells alone. But then you've also see Russia is adding in these new FAB 1500s, FAB 3000s, which are huge multi-kilogram bombs that are precision guided new categories of bombs that they have adjusted as the war has gone on, which has had devastating effects at the front. Everywhere along the front, they're moving back. There is no rational case to be made that, as Biden was trying to get in that commercial there, to get the Congress to pony up $60 billion. It's going to be a drop in the bucket. It's not going to make any difference at all. And yet he's pinning everything on that, or at least that's the way he's projecting it.
Absolutely. And I know we've discussed this before, and forgive me for saying it again, but the US is 34 trillion in debt, and it goes up by $1 trillion in a relatively short period of time.
I think 90 days, every 90 days.
I mean, I know it was something like that, and I didn't want to say that in case it was inaccurate, but I know it was a very short period of time. And it's, I don't know, incomprehensible. I mean, I'm lost for words. I'm not normally lost for words. I mean, where why aren't people, why isn't anything, why aren't people talking about this? Why aren't people talking about this? I mean, it's insane. It's just the periphery thing.
See, that gets to the whole issue that even this show here is you have regular people, normal people who calculate the way you talked about a minute ago, negotiating to get to a position of strength and not being foolish from a scrappy do position to try to go against somebody that you can't win. But it's like on the elite level, those dynamics are flipped. And somehow if you can just spin it nice and make a good production, that'll get you through, as long as you don't, as Scrappy doesn't have to actually engage with that dragon.
Of course. It is. It's just mind blowing. I mean, it's telephone numbers. I mean, the NATO. In summer 2022, the NATO military were planning on having a huge build up of a NATO alliance around China. So just in the same way that Russia's surrounded, the NATO plan is to do the same with China. And obviously the war with Russia is to hopefully get rid of Putin. Well, we all know that's not going to happen. But they want to weaken Russia so that when they take on China's not invading anybody. A friend of mine, David Shaler's is a former MI5 intelligence officer. And he said that when he was at MI5, China were always perceived as a threat. Don't get me wrong. They were always perceived as a threat. But the threat was always an economic threat, not a military threat. China was not going to come with its navy, knocking on Britain, banging on our doors, taking over Britain. That was never going to happen. But they would steal our secrets, and military secrets as well, but also our commercial secrets, copy them, replicate them, do them cheaper. So they were always perceived as an economic threat. Yeah. All of a sudden, they're a massive military threat. Where did that come from? Where's the evidence to show that? It's nonsense.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, without question, the Chinese military has been building up. But as I've argued multiple times for years, actually, you look at where it's going, what type of capabilities. It's all to defend itself against an attack by a large country, i.e. the United States or an allies like the Britain, Australia, etc. So everything is directed toward their shores and their region. Not towards projecting power anywhere else in the world, but towards here. And they're no threat to attack outside of their region,
no,
United States, anywhere else.
No.
But they are a big threat and a growing threat to anyone who would seek to attack them from the outside. And that is the big problem that we have, is that we're laying the foundation for actually moving in that direction, but they have the capacity to defend, and we don't have the capacity to successfully attack. And why would we want to?
Yeah, no, of course, it is all theatre. I saw it on I can't remember which US channel. This is last year, and it was the head of the Pacific Fleet on an aircraft carrier, and he was sat in a chair below deck, which was open, and there were helicopters flying past. I mean, it really was it was a scene out of Top Gun. It looked really cool. I was very impressed, very impressed. And he was being interviewed, and the interviewer was saying, we're talking about the big threat from China, and he was basically saying, we're locked and loaded, we're ready to go, there is no issue. And I remember thinking, should a military person really be speaking like that? He should just be saying that, we're here to serve, protect America. I'm waiting on any orders from my commander in chief, and we're prepared for every eventuality. But he was talking tough talk about fighting China, and it was nonsense. It was absolute nonsense. Good theatre, great TV, but not really what military guys should be doing. You're there to defend, not to attack. And it just came across really badly. But from my perspective, anyway, if you want to attack China and have a war with China, then he's your man. I mean, it looked great, but it shouldn't be about that.
Yeah, and actually, here just last week, I know the one you're talking about from a year and a half or so ago, but we actually had some hearings here last week. And Gary, do we still have that clip handy? Yeah, we're going to have that up here in just a second, but it's going to be kind of remarkable because again, you're talking about what we should be doing and what you should be hearing from these leaders, but then you find out what they actually are saying is, and again, it just really gets to the point. Theater is the best way to say, because when this comes up here, watch how emphatic and scary this is. The only thing it's missing is some music in the background. If there was some music, this would be a lot better. Gary, do we have that ready here? Not yet. Okay. Well, we'll get to that as soon as we get a chance. But that is, as we're talking about some of the statesmen here in this show here and some of the leaders of the countries, but you see it extends down even to the military, because things are all kind of tied together to where, you have the heads of state, and then you had the senior political leaders, you have the senior military leaders. And when I say elite, that's what I'm talking about, that whole upper band, which very often is disconnected from reality, but about perpetuating itself in
they're largely neocons, aren't they? They're all neocons. Doesn't matter what party when Donald Trump came in, he appointed John Bolton, warmonger in chief. You think, right. He was going to clean the swamp, and then he employed the swamp monster. What was all that about? Yeah,
this chief swamp meister himself, complete with the big beard and everything. So, yeah, he was pretty good. So anyway, all right. Well, so we got this. So again, as you're watching this,
but what we all have to understand is we haven't faced a threat like this since World War II. Okay, the largest military, again, as Senator Wicker said, the world's largest Navy, soon to be the world's largest Air Force. So the magnitude, scope, and scale of this security challenge cannot be understated.
Man, again, if there was just some music under the bed there, that would have been so good, but it was very dramatic. The most since World War II, implying that they're just about to come get us. It's going to be a new Pearl Harbor, something like that. You see the continuity here that's going along. This is, again, another statesman or actor.
Actor.
Okay,
how many of these 4 stars, how many of these generals actually had real combat experience, like yourself, Colonel McGregor? How many of them actually had real combat experience? I tried to Google it and I couldn't find a real answer.
Yeah, and especially when you're talking about the Air Force and the Navy, none. We haven't had any engagement by an opponent since, really, I guess Vietnam is the last time we actually fought an Air Force or a Navy. And of course, they didn't have much of a Navy. You really have to go back to World War II for an actual Navy. So really, these guys don't have any real world experience at all. And that is part of the problem. But now that you talk about, or I was talking about, if only they had music under the bed here. Well, some people have actually learned how to do that. And we have Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine took what Biden did there a second ago and made it a little bit better. This is more like a scene from a movie.
Thank you very much, Senator, and your team. Thanks for coming. That's a good signal for us, for Ukrainians. And of course, from the very beginning, let me to be thankful to the United States, to the people of your country, your bipartisan support, and to President, his administration. Thanks so much. Also, we are thankful for all these 2 years support from Congress of the United States. And now this is very challenging period for Ukraine and also in the United States. We wanted very much to hear what do you think about it, what do you think about support. So future support. So thanks, welcome.
We'll talk about all of the above, but before we say anything, I just admire what you and your people have been able to do for 2 years. I remember we were told he would fall in 4 weeks. We're still here, still fighting. Putin won in a landslide. You know why he got 87%? Because I guess he didn't want 88. That would look bad. So this is the 10th anniversary of the annexation of Crimea. So better days ahead for the people of Ukraine. And Putin will go down in history the way all the people like Putin go down in history. Just a matter of time.
That was literally like, I mean, you had the camera sliding across, doing all this kind of stuff. And you had Calabria. I don't know if you noticed there toward the end, he had this really sorrowful look on his face and kind of looked down as Lindsey Graham was talking about some of the stuff. Again, absolute stagecraft. And I'm just, it's like there literally, Ian, is no end to how far people will go instead of just giving information. Now that it's overtly trying to match what you see on your television screen.
So you showed that to me last time when we discussed it, and I discussed that with some other people at the Ministry of Defence, and they said they took 2 or 3 takes to do that. They didn't all walk in the room,
really?
film,
No kidding.
and it was all live, done in 1 take. No, there was 2 or 3 takes just to get it right, getting all the various camera angles.
Oh,
so that
man.
Obviously it was edited. It's just theatre. It's just absolute theatre.
So what happened? What do you think happens for regular people? I mean, you can give your own view, but anyone else you've talked to, does this get anything besides, eye rolling kind of, oh, please, or does it make people go, wow, yeah, we got to do this?
Depends. Good question.
Does it?
I think it's all theatre. It's all nonsense. No, if they were real men in
you're
that
saying
room,
that there's some people that actually do respond to that.
yeah, absolutely. I'll cover that. But if they were real men, and they'd lost 500,000 plus people, they would be saying, right, okay, this isn't going well. Let's be frank. Let's talk about ending this on the most favourable terms that we can and enter peace negotiations. That's what real men would do. That's what statesmen would do.
Indeed.
You know that they're
Well
actors.
said.
You know they're actors because they're saying we're going to win this. We've got the courage. We've got the will. We just need more money. It's complete. Yeah, they're not doing the fighting. Their kids aren't on the front line. So they're actors. They're absolute actors. Good actors, by the way, powerful actors, and it's all parroted by the mainstream media. To address your question, people are influenced by everyday people think Putin woke up one morning. He's a big bad wolf. He went in and tried to take another country, and the brave Ukrainians fought back, which if it was true, that would be the right thing to do. And they have a right to defend their country as well. I'm not saying they don't. Of course they do. Of course they do. But it's just a mess. It's a mess. And you've lost a generation of men. When is enough enough? When is enough enough?
Yeah. So I don't have to ask you that because you've already answered. That's actor, not statesman. And you very eloquently said what an actual statesman would have done. And that's why we love you on this show. Okay, so let's move on now to something a little bit more closer to home for you. We had President Biden on. Now we have Rishi Sunak.
And it is beyond alarming that last night the Rochdale by-election returned a candidate who dismisses the horror of what happened on October the 7th, who glorifies Hezbollah and is endorsed by Nick Griffin, the racist former leader of the BNP. Yes, you can march and protest with passion. You can demand the protection of civilian life. But no, you cannot call for violent jihad. You can freely criticize the actions of this government, or indeed any government. That is a fundamental democratic right. But no, you cannot use that as an excuse to call for the eradication of a state or any kind of hatred or anti-Semitism.
Now, for some of our viewers who may not know, he was specifically talking about the election of George Galloway from Rochdale, who had just won, and it was a big shock. You talked about this last time you were on here, but I wanted to play that one again, and a little bit expanded from the last time, because he was saying that you don't have the right to just say what you want. You don't have the right to call for Islamic Jihad or what was the phrase he used there, for the destruction of another state. Did George Galloway actually make those allegations?
Of course not. Of course not. When you get him on your show, and I promise I will get him on. I know George is and he said to me that he will come on. He will definitely come on. He's just so busy. He's so busy, but he will come on. You can put all these questions to him. Absolutely no. He doesn't even support Hamas. He's anti-Hamas. It's just nonsense. It's just, but when the Prime Minister says something, because of the stature of his office, or her office, in this case, it's a chap. When the Prime Minister speaks from that podium, from that platform, he has, or she has, credibility. You expect them to have fact-checked everything, and they're not. It's just all theatre. It's all theatre. And if he was half a man, he's not a particularly large man either. If he was half a man, he would be saying, "Look, Ukraine's lost half a generation of young men. We are going to campaign for peace," and he will be respected. He's not. It's not. If you say peace, you're some kind of weirdo. It's nuts. In fact, you're not a weirdo. You're a Kremlin. You're a Kremlin agent. I mean, it's insane. It's just insane.
It says I think you've told me before that a lot of because when I hear that, when you and I hear that, we both just like, what are you talking about? Because we do know the facts that are underneath the things that were said there, and especially when you're talking about the war in Ukraine and between Russia and all that kind of stuff. But as I understand from you, that a lot of the public doesn't know all that. So when they hear the Prime Minister say that, and on the national television with alarming, kind of flourishing rhetoric, that they think it must be true.
Absolutely. And then the next morning, all of the press will be covering a story about how we need to stamp out all of these people like George Galloway with an alternate view, which is not that alternative, actually, when you get to hear what he says. It's a lot of common sense. But it really questions the government narrative, and they don't like their narratives changed. I could go out and stand on a street corner with a megaphone and say all sorts of things about the government. No one would give a monkeys. But when you're in Parliament and you have a voice, and George has a huge platform online, for example, he's a threat. He's a threat. No one would debate him. The simple answer is, if I disagreed profusely with everything you stand for, everything you say, Colonel, I would say, look, you and I need to have a debate, and we'd have a one-to-one debate. We film it, we put it online, and let people judge for themselves. That would be a really good means of trying to get to a point where we're trying to be positive, and something creative and positive comes from it, rather than just arguing for argument's sake. They wouldn't debate him in a million years. They know they'd be insane to. They've got no chance.
Because if people had a chance to actually hear the arguments side by side, then the reality would start to come in. And even with the office of the Prime Minister or the office of President in our country, it would fall apart pretty quickly if regular people had a chance to hear both sides.
I'll give you a fantastic example. So last February 2022, George Galloway, and I'm not a spokesman for George Galloway, by the way, he's just a friend that I like and respect. And love, because he helped me personally many years ago, which means a lot to me. He debated in the Oxford Union, Ben Wallace, the Defence Minister, and he didn't turn up. Ben Wallace, the Defence Minister, didn't turn up. So there was only one side of the argument or the debate, which George Wally, you can see it online. I'll post it on my Twitter feed afterwards. It's just phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. You could see why he didn't turn up. He was wise not to turn up.
I can say that. I know exactly what you're talking about. I've seen his speech. It is a remarkable video. And please do post that on your Twitter, because I recommend everybody to watch that, just almost out of entertainment value alone. His soaring rhetoric, and then the facts that are underneath it. It's something to watch.
Some of the guys at the Ministry of Defence in London, when we were discussing it afterwards, we said, I would have paid money to have gone and seen that, because they would like to have seen George Galloway versus the current Defence Minister. And some of the guys said, there's no way that he would turn up for that. No way. And they were right.
Yeah. So there again, I think we have to say statesman or actor.
You know,
Okay, I won't even bother to ask anymore. I think it's self-evident.
Honestly, I really am. I don't want to sound like some anarchist. I'm not. You know, I would like a leader that we could be proud of.
Yeah.
You know, actor all day. Nonsense. You know, you can go back to Goldman Sachs, the investment bank where he came from. It's not nonsense. You know, working people he wouldn't give a monkey's about.
Yeah. Okay, so real quick here, let's work through another here. I've got, for the next one here, I've actually got 3 short clips I want to show of the Polish leader Duda, because it kind of shows a couple of different aspects of this, which I want to get to in a minute. So first of all, here he's saying that Russia has to be punished, because if we don't stop them, my God, they're coming for us all.
If Russia wins the war in Ukraine, if Putin wins the war in Ukraine, he will attack one more time. He will attack other states, because this is Russian imperialism reborn, and it is greedy. It will be willing to attack further. That is why it has to be stopped. It has to be blocked, and it has to be punished. And this is the most important task.
He went a little bit further a couple of days later and said that actually, but not only did we not have to stop him, he may already be planning, and it could come as soon as 2026.
Soon, perhaps as early as 2026 or 2027, Putin, by putting his economy on a war footing, will have such military might that he'll be able to attack NATO. Okay then, the alarm bells are ringing. We have 2 or 3 years in which we can increase our efforts, stockpile ammunition, and produce weapons to maximise European security. Get ready and make sure the invasion doesn't happen. Let me reiterate, all this needs to be done in order for us not to fight. The point is to create such a deterrent that ensures we're not attacked. This is the whole point, because no one wants war.
Now, I'm going to talk about that again in a second, because he's basically laying the justification for a huge ramp up in their defense spending. But before we get there, it's really interesting that he was interviewed by Bloomberg Television here recently, and the reporter asked him something he didn't want to go down to, which kind of makes it an odd thing that you're talking about supporting Ukraine while at the same time doing this.
You said today that there will be a legal solution at the WTO, but then you also said that it will be, quote, good if Ukraine would remember that it does receive assistance from Poland. And then you said that Ukraine should know it is a transit country, Poland. Is that a threat to Zelensky?
No, this is not the point, to lead any kind of discussion in the media. Personally, I regret that there is a discussion going on in the media. I will try to cut it off for sure, because somebody has to be wiser here, and the situation is not easy.
Yeah, I bet you wish the media wasn't covering that, because what almost nobody, at least in the U.S. media, covers is that there has been a lot of issues and even recent weeks and days between Poland and the Ukraine farmers, because the Poland has been physically blocking routes. They won't allow the Polish food out. I mean, everybody talks about how Russia got rid of the grain deal that was going out through the Black Sea, but nobody talks about that Poland is very much blocking exports are going out through their country, because they don't want the competition that's coming from the Ukrainian farmers, who of course are dying for every dollar that they can get of their produce. And so it's like you're almost treating Ukraine like they're an annoyance, while so you're really looking over here to do something against Russia.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just another actor. But it's the politics of fear. It's the politics of fear. We can keep you safe. Just need to vote us in, spend loads of money, borrow loads of money, print loads of money, get more weapons. The politics of fear. And the narrative is that it's a clever narrative, and it definitely works. It definitely works. That you know Russia is weak because Russia tried to take over the whole of Ukraine. And it didn't take over the whole of Ukraine. We both know that wasn't their main objective. But if you believe their main objective was to take over the country, then they failed. So they keep citing that fake or false objective. So people believe that the threat's coming. But then the argument is, and we had this before, if they're so weak, why are they a threat to anybody?
Right.
It's just nonsense.
Right.
It's nonsense.
Yeah.
You can't have it both ways.
Yeah, but they do, because I think they're probably the same issue as in Poland, as is in the UK, as is in the United States, to where most of the people listening, of course, then it's repeated on all the national media, and that's all that the message that they talk about for the most part. is that these things have to happen and that those things are true, that Russia is coming to get us. And then when they say that, but Russia is so weak because they couldn't do anything, most of the people don't put those two things together and go, hang on, how can those both be true at the same time? It's never asked.
There's not enough critical thinking. We've become lazy. And we just trust the sources. We trust the BBC, for example. So people trust their news sources. And the reason they trust them is because the thinking's been done for you. You shouldn't have to think, oh, I've just read and watched a news article on the BBC. I need to fact check that. You shouldn't have to do that. You don't have the time to do that. So that there's the quandary, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And that's one of the reasons, frankly, why we've created this channel, because as a counterweight to all those, because even when I've gone on the BBC, I've gone on Fox News, NBC, CNN, etc., but I have a few minutes to actually say something. And any answered question is between 40 and 45 seconds is generally how much. Well, you can't go into any depth on that at all. And then they switch on to whatever's next. So we on this channel have a chance to actually put on what these people are saying and then give the context underneath it to actually educate people who are taking the time to watch this longer show, as opposed to a 5-minute segment they see on the BBC or Fox News, etc. So that's why we have this. And, our channel's growing pretty big. And by the way, let me again ask you guys to please like and subscribe to this channel right now if you haven't already, because that's one of the ways we can keep escalating and making our channel available to more people. So we appreciate you guys doing that. But if you don't do that, then you're problematic is that you get stuck with these actors. And here's the danger of it. So up to this point, and I've actually got one more to show you here. Actually, yeah, before I get to that point, let's show you. We got one last one to look at here, and that is Turkish leader Erdogan, who goes on, and in this case, we always talk about the unity of NATO. Well, especially when it comes to the issue of Israel, there's mostly unity, but then you have this big outlier.
Gazze'de son asrın en büyük mezalimlerinden birini yapan Netanyahu adını tarihe şimdiden Gazze kasabı olarak yazdırmıştır. Bu kara leke sadece Netanyahu'nun değil, ona koşulsuz destek veren herkesin alnına yapışmıştır. Bu utanç lekesi hiçbir zaman temizlenmeyecektir.
So look, man, you talk about some good actors. Erdogan is certainly on the top tiers. He's second to nobody.
Absolutely. So I asked the head of NATO, Britain's the person that's physically in charge of, or is responsible for. I can't say without saying his name. Anyway, the most senior person in the British military responsible with working for NATO. I asked him in 22 because there was all this about Finland joining NATO, Sweden joining NATO, and he was blocking it. And we're having a gin and tonic, and I asked him directly. I said, could he be kicked out of NATO? Because he's blocking this. He went, oh, no chance. He said, NATO's a very, very difficult alliance because every country's got its own objectives, which it should have, by the way, its own plans, own commitments. So he said it's a very, very difficult alliance. No, I definitely don't foresee him being kicked out. And then you see him there, being extremely robust about the genocide in Israel, and you think, well, that's great. He's using the word genocide and he's speaking really, he's saying the right things, which is what you expect from your leader. But he still supplies Israel with its oil and gas. So if he cared a little bit, there will be some things that he could physically do, but they bring in money. So.
Yeah, and who is his audience that he's acting for is a lot of the Muslims who are in strong agreement with the Palestinians. So he wants to sound tough for his people while not actually having to do anything behind it. It's not much different at all than what you saw from the Western leaders we showed earlier.
No, but he, as you say, is at the top of the tree because, you saw him there saying the right things. You think, good man, respect you for saying that, but he's not doing the doing. He's not cutting the oil and gas. I mean, I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, and I might be wrong on this, but there was obviously issues with Finland and Sweden. Didn't America have to bribe him with planes or something, F-15, F-16s?
Oh yeah, this was absolutely a transactional issue. It had nothing to do with NATO unity
No.
or any fear of Russia that this needed to solidify up. It was purely transactional, and of course, we're only too happy to do that because that means more weapons that we get to sell to Turkey. So that's fine.
Absolutely. So actor.
So here's the issue. This is what I think this whole thing gets around to, and that's why we've included a broad range of leaders from many different countries that are all Western or Western allied, and that is that you see that you can say whatever you want if nothing happens, if there is no catastrophic consequences. You just get to the next election and just move on, and whether you ever do any of these things or not, or whether you take any action, it largely, and at least up to this point, really hasn't mattered. But when things go sideways, and if you ignore reality long enough, spin will one day run into reality, and you're going to have a crash. And that's why, especially with this terrorist attack that has happened in Moscow, we have what I've been worried about from the beginning is a black swan event, which could change the dynamics of everything. And Putin is going to come under enormous pressure domestically to respond in some strong way beyond this. And I don't think that even if ISIS actually did it, and it's unknown whether they did or not, or whether Ukraine had something to do with it, it seems pretty clear from looking at the Russian population and a lot of their social media, a lot of their national media, that they are all coalescing around it was definitely Ukraine. Whether it was or not is almost inconsequential.
No.
That's what they're painting it to. Russia or Putin will now have a lot of pressure to take some kind of big, huge response to that, or his people, I think, would genuinely lose some confidence in him. So like George Bush after 9/11, like Netanyahu after October 7th, he is going to be, he's got a free reign. He can literally do whatever he wants, and his people will support it. So if he wants to escalate in something in the Ukraine, there will be a lot of pressure on the West to do something else as opposed to letting Ukraine lose further. And that's what I'm worried about. If that reality imposes itself against the narrative, against the acting, that it's not, you can't support it anymore, we could be at the risk of either backing down or making an even more foolish act and escalating.
Well, how do all conflicts end? All of them, whenever they end or however they end with peace talks. So the West there will be a position or a point in time where they have to engage in talks, and I don't see that at all at the moment. I just see the posturing and the big chest coming out, and everyone's ready to fight. But the reality is, fight with what? As we've just discussed, fight with very, very little. Putin's a difficult one to call because he's fairly considered. I believe he's a lawyer by a trained lawyer. Obviously, he's a golden oldie, so he was part of the KGB, and he's still perceived as, KGB Putin. But when you listen to him talk, if you listen to all his talks from 2014 or pre-2014, he was warning the West, and he's very considered, saying, we don't want American missiles on our border. It's a red line for us. I mean, Joe Biden said we don't recognize your red line. So it'd be interesting to see what he does. I'm not sure. My gut feeling, and I might be wrong, obviously, my gut feeling is he's not going to do a George Bush and go out to the world and say, I need to prove I am, and I'm going to fight back because I'm so strong. I don't think he will do that. We'll see.
Yeah.
But there will be
he may not have the luxury of not doing anything big because his supporters within Russia, at least what's been broadcast so far, is that they are expecting some kind of something equal to the tragedy that happened, because it is a trauma for Russia, just like it was in the U.S. on 9/11, like it was in Israel on 10/7. And so they will expect something of him. The question is going to be, how far does he go? And I don't really have a good feel for it right now, but I know that many are suggesting some pretty strong measures in Kiev. Like, you have this one here from Dmitry Medvedev. He's always been a firebrand and all.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But he's not the only one saying that the last line there, death for death, is what he's saying. And if the Kiev regime is found to be responsible, meaning if we choose to designate them so, regardless of what the facts say, then they could be taking some actions against the regime itself in Kiev, and that could change things a lot. I don't know how that would happen, but I worry about it.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And obviously, if it was Medvedev that was in charge, it would be happening now. He'd be out there firing guns himself, be like the Terminator. But I go back to what I just said. I think Putin's quite considered. I appreciate what you say about he's under pressure, and I don't think there's any doubt about that. He said in his interview with Tucker Carlson, he will never win the PR war. He can never win that. He said, because half of the media is owned by the CIA, so they print whatever the US government or the neocons or the deep state, or whatever you want to call them. So he's never going to win that battle. And whatever he does, and if he does just, he does just go nuclear, and I don't mean nuclear physically, I mean if he just goes out big time and does something really big, he's never going to win that. He'll win it with the Russian people because they'll want to see some kind of response. I'm still not, in my heart of hearts, I'm not convinced he will. We'll see. We'll see.
Honestly, for our sake, I hope you're right, because that would limit the damage, and
that'd be another beer you owe me.
It would allow this whole group of actors we've just shown for you today to continue on in their acting roles and probably get renewed for additional seasons, so to speak.
Yeah,
but then nobody else extra has to die, and that's what I'm most about. But like you say, we'll see.
Yeah.
And we will continue to bring this to you guys here. Thanks, Ian, for being on today.
Absolute pleasure.
I think
Thanks
you
for
guys
inviting
can
me.
see why I call Ian the smartest guy in London, because you see that he has actually talking this. So thanks for coming on today, Ian, and we'll look forward to having you back real soon. And thank you for joining us today. We remain unintimidated, uncompromised in bringing you the truth that you need. And we got one more show for you this afternoon at 2:00. We were going to bring you an update on the things that have been happening in that situation with the terror attack in Russia. And then we're going to look at the situation. Are more U.S. troops in Poland permanently stationed there in America's interest or not? We're going to take a look at that, and we're going to have an expert professor from the University of Colorado, Peter Harris, is going to be on today. You're not going to want to miss that. It'll be good. See you at 2 p.m. on the next Daniel Davis Deep Dive.